because you are part of the called out. Ecclesia is a community within a community whose purpose and function was to add value to the community. If our church exists just for us, what's the point? If our church exists just to gather on Thursday nights so we could show up and we could just learn more and we could worship more and we could see our peers more, what's the point? To that end, I say that this no longer is church then. This is just a gathering of peeps showing up for a social gathering. Yes? If we're going to be the sent ones of God, if we are going to be the church, it means we must do something. We must do something, and no longer is it okay to become numb to passion and numb to progress and numb to movement. Moving on. But you are a chosen people. I'm not going to promise anything of getting through the text tonight, so we're going to have to finish this up in a couple weeks. Buckle in, we're going to go fast. Ready? But you are a chosen people. Feel the weight of this phrase. Pause real quick. If you've got to close your eyes because you got ADD and you're just freaking all over the place right now, feel the weight of this phrase. You are a chosen people. Remember who the you is. It's the church. It's the people who belong to God. Feel the weight of that. Chosen people. Let it sit on your shoulders. You're chosen people. Now, here's the deal. This isn't the first time we've heard this phrase in history, is it not? In fact, we've heard this from the not too distant past. The Nazi regime called themselves the master race. It was the Nazi regime. If you were to look back in Nazi rhetoric, it was passages like this in Scripture that they used to justify their actions and to understand their premise of God. They used this specific passage of Scripture to justify their actions under the guise and the premise of God as the master race. The Crusades used similar language. We're the chosen people, the chosen race. Anyone who's not like us, we're going to take them out. Centuries of history has dictated people bastardizing Scripture and taking it way out of context to justify their own perspectives and their own desires. So I would assume that you would agree with me that it is very significant and important and critical and crucial that we understand who is the chosen people, yes? And so here's the chosen people. I'll tell you what the chosen people is not. The chosen people is not a black and white issue. The chosen people is not an Asian or Hispanic issue. The chosen people has nothing to do with socioeconomic status, has nothing to do with high school you go to, has nothing to do with what neighborhood you live in, or whether or not you belong to a country club or not, or what car you drive, or what team you play for, or what yearbook or newspaper staff or team that you write for or participate in. The chosen people has nothing to do with that. The chosen people simply are those who belong to God. The chosen people are those who are deeply connected to God. The chosen people. Now here's the deal, real quick. Because I'm going to jump off this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to highlight these next 4 pieces of an identity, and we're going to give you characteristics of it, and then I'm going to show you that if you struggle with this piece of identity, here's what you're going to struggle with. Let me give you a by the way real quick, though. Here's a by the way. If you think that racial tension doesn't exist in St. Charles, you're ignorant. You're ignorant. In fact, in the early 90s, this is incredible, Google this tonight. In fact, the early 90s, they did a nationwide research on segregation, modern day racial tension. And they used St. Louis. They used St. Louis as the most racially segregated city in America a decade and a half ago. We would be remiss to think that today racial tension doesn't exist here. How beautiful is this picture? Let me give you a portrayal of what the chosen people looks like. It's unity, yet diversity. The chosen people looks like unity, it's unified, yet it's diversified. The chosen people is unified, yet racially and economically and culturally we're diverse. Is that not a beautiful picture of the chosen people? The chosen people, it doesn't mean that they necessarily look like you or they live in the same place that you live and they have the same economic social status that we have. The chosen people is unified yet diversified. There's unity yet there's diversity. Is that not brilliant? Is that not beautiful? And we would be ignorant tonight to think that some of your families aren't racist. I'll take it a step further. I guarantee you some of your grandparents are racist. Guarantee it. My grandfather straight off the boat from Italy. And just recently, he come to know who Jesus is, and God continues to transform his life with the good news of the gospel. But my grandpa strongly disliked African Americans forever. And let everybody know about it. We would be remiss and we would be ignorant to think that racial tension still doesn't exist. There's no way that we're going to be the chosen people if we continue to allow the injustice of racial tension to continue. I grew up in New York. I went to a school where 85% of my school was African American. 10% was Hispanic. The rest was white. I grew up knowing that it was the heart of a man that mattered because I grew up in it. It's much different in the suburbs, is it not? There's a reason why they call the suburbs the white flight. The church must be at the center of racial reconciliation. The church must be right in the middle, in the core of making sure that racial tension doesn't exist anymore. This isn't some I have a dream speech. We're moving beyond that. We're moving past that. This is the truth of the gospel. The truth of the gospel is blinded to color and to socioeconomic status. The chosen people is unified yet diversified. Let me give you another picture of the chosen people. The chosen people simply says this: God invites us knowing full well that we will never meet up to his standards. Listen to this, a picture of the chosen race. God invites us into this deep, authentic, personal relationship with him, knowing full well that we will never, ever meet his standards, and then he floods us with his love and acceptance. The chosen people will never meet up to God's standards, and then he floods us with his love and his acceptance. It's almost like he knew all of our junk, our scum, grotesque pieces, and he still invited us and calls us his child and floods us with his grace and his love and his mercy. Listen, if that doesn't conjure up, if that doesn't create a sense of blessing and gratitude in your life, then I don't know what will. He chose you and I. He invited you and I, knowing full well that we will never meet up to his standards. And he floods our life with love and acceptance. If that doesn't build and create blessing and gratitude in our heart, I don't know what will. And so if you struggle with this piece of your identity, being a chosen people, if you struggle with this piece of your identity, you're going to struggle with grace because you're still trying to earn it. You still think that you can be holy You still think that you can make sense of life on your own. Listen to me, it's impossible. It's impossible. If that's your gospel, that's not the gospel at all. The gospel simply says that it's through Jesus and Jesus alone that our identity is found, period. If you struggle with the piece of your identity being part of the chosen people, your struggle is with grace. Because only those whose hearts are filled with gratitude will fully ever understand grace. It's like the leper in Luke 17. There's 10 of them. Jesus tells them to go show themselves to the priest. They get their healing, and only one of them returns and throws himself at the feet of Jesus. And Jesus looks at him and says, you today, you will be healed. That word healed is the same word that we get the word saved. Only one that day got Jesus. The other 9 got healed, but only one got Jesus. Why? What's the difference between that one leper and the other 9? The difference was he had a heart full of gratitude. And when he recognized what Jesus did, when he recognized that Jesus invited him, knowing full well that he'll never measure up to God's standards, his life was flooded with love and acceptance. And his only response was worship. His only response was gratitude. And he threw himself at the feet of Jesus, and Jesus said, you get this. You understand the magnitude of grace. If you struggle with the piece of your identity of being a chosen people, you struggle with grace. Secondly, you're a chosen people, a royal priesthood. Peter doesn't get this out of nowhere. You can flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 6 through 8, which we're not going to, but right now flip it over. If you want, it'll be up on the screen. Just look up at Exodus chapter 19, verses 5. If you obey me fully and keep my covenants, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. This is Moses. He's speaking to the Israelites after they've been rescued out of slavery from Egypt. Although the whole earth is mine, verse 6, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Here's what's going on in the Old Testament. What's going on is something drastically shifts because of Jesus. And here's what shifts. In the Old Testament, because of their obedience, because God chose the nation of Israel, and again in Deuteronomy chapter 7, it's because of nothing they did. God chose the nation of Israel, and he kept his covenant to the nation of Israel that he was going to make them his prized possession, his holy nation. But what happened was, it was the Israelites, it was the very Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious leadership of the day who put Jesus on the cross. The Jews didn't get it. They knew everything they were supposed to know. They did everything they were supposed to do, and they missed Jesus standing right in front of them. The Jews, the Israelites, the Pharisees, the Sadducees in the New Testament, they reveal to us that it's impossible to make life make sense apart from Jesus. And so through Jesus, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago with the reconciliation ministry of Jesus, through Jesus, the Old Testament Israelites, specifically through the line of Aaron, they were the priests. But through Jesus, in the New Testament, the priests are the church, and the church is you and I. That's why Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, he calls us a royal priesthood. Now here's the picture. If you think about a royal court, you've got a king, and you've got a prince. Now underneath the prince, you've got lots of other peeps, other folk, other subjects. And so the picture here of the royal priesthood is that as being a part of the royal courts, you have access to the king. We need to understand this. The picture here of the royal priesthood in the New Testament is that you and I, through Christ, have been given access to God. And here's what's even better, because here's the characteristics of a royal priesthood. Access, but what's even better is we were also given authority. Through Jesus, we have access and we have authority to God.